Well, thanks so much, Rob, for coming on and having a conversation today.
Hey, Chris, it's good to see you again. Thank you very much for having me.
So I want to jump in with some warm-up questions for you. I'm a marketer, and I marvel at brands. What's the first brand that you remember being connected to?
I had to dig way, way back on that one. I think it was Schwinn bicycles. I love bicycles, and I always have since I learned how to ride when I was 6. And I always wanted a Schwinn bike. I never had one though, because we couldn't afford them. I always got kind of random, the cheapest thing available bikes, and but I always wanted a Schwinn.
Mm. Is there as far as brands go, do you think of do you feel like even at a subconscious level that Schwinn affects the way that you present yourself or your interest in working for companies, or has that impacted your creative life at all?
Not really. But the thing I will say, thinking about that question had me really thinking about the effects that brands have on me. That's something I've always thought about. And I've never been a super brand loyal or brand conscious person. Like, I don't have logos on my clothes and stuff like that. I don't, I buy things. I tend to buy things for utility, and but there are things. I'm a human, and of course, there's things I covet. And marketing doesn't help with the coveting process.
Totally,
damn marketers.
I know. For me, I'm now when I was in high school, I was obsessed with Nike. And now my shopping consists of, when we go to Costco, I look at this is a Costco polo. I have Costco jeans on. It's just straight dad mode, just total utility and whatever is convenient.
That is the way it goes.
Yeah. What was your first job and worst job?
The very first job I had was dishwashing and bussing tables at the Officers Club in Schweinfurt, Germany. My dad was in the military, so we were stationed there at the time, and I think I was 13 or something like that. Probably too young to work there, but they were like, "Here, come in here and wash dishes and earn some money." And I said, "Okay, cool."
That's awesome.
It was, and Google thought I was talking to it. Thanks, Google.
And then your worst job.
The worst job I had, that was probably selling radio advertising right out of college. I was a DJ at the college radio station at UC Riverside, where I graduated, and I did an internship at the local professional radio station, and they loved me so much that they gave me a choice. They said, you could work in programming or you could work in sales. And my dad was like, "You got to make money coming out of college," and blah blah blah. And it was that was the mentality he had. None of the pursuit of purpose, that didn't register with parents back then. So it was all about money. So my dad convinced me to take the sales job, and I fucking hated it. Oh God, it was awful.
Instead, that's funny because nowadays I feel like people would be going to programming.
It's changed a lot, and it was a terrible job. For me, it wasn't so much the cold calling and stuff. It was that I didn't you're really talking people into buying something and telling them it works without any real proof. The whole Arbitron and Nielsen rating, shenanigans that they do to justify the rates that they charge it's horrifying, actually, if you think about it from a true product standpoint. And it always grated with me, and I just never loved it. And I did that for probably 6 or 7 months. I think it was less than a year, and then just slunk out the door one day.
So the main reason I was excited to talk to you is because ever since I met you, this is probably, 4 years ago in Bend. We both lived in Bend, and you were a part of this motion graphics Meetup Group. And I had been interested in motion graphics, but I was more of video focused. And still very creative, but I appreciated and had worked with very talented motion graphics people. So I stopped in at this Meetup Group at the Whiskey Bar in Bend. And I remember just it was the coolest collection of people that were just talking about projects they had going on, sharing advice, there's this new tool I was experimenting with. and it was something that I felt, well, I was interested in, like, the culture of this very small group, right? And like how you had, I'm assuming there's probably people that come and go, but a few people that are consistent people that attend that. But what I remember from you was you gave off this, I don't know, the air of like growth mindset. And then over the last 4 years, I've, followed you on LinkedIn and see that that's something that you're kind of rooted in. Where do you, I guess you can tell everyone a little bit about this meetup group. I don't know if it still happens or if you still do this, or how you have like connected or try to connect with people in that way.
The Meetup Group is something I started after moving here to Bend. So I moved to Bend from Los Angeles about a little over 6 years ago now. And when I didn't know anybody actually I take that back. I knew one couple when I moved here, and I'd been here probably 6 or 7 months, and decided I wanted to try and meet some folks, and just kind of put it out there, and to see who else was here. And turned out there was actually a really interesting community of creative professionals here in town, and it started off really small, just a couple of us, just meeting for drinks. And there's a pretty large membership on Meetup.com, but we only have like probably 5 or 6 people that normally ever show up. That's kind of the nature of Meetup. But the fact that so many people signed up for it, for me, was the most encouraging thought, because it showed how much interest there was in the subject, but also how many people that consider themselves to be creative live here in town. And that was really exciting for me. And some of I think my best friends in town here have all come from that group of folks, and it's been incredible to have that.
Is it true, or would you say that there is a strong like desire to learn? Is that, or was that just a day that I came and noticed that?
It's there. It kind of varies from, I started the group to be purely social. There's actually another meetup group here in town, the Bend Digital Creators, run by a guy, Chris Fasson. And he really wants that to be more of a dedicated learning group, like learning and networking. Like that's, he's all about that. And for me, it was much more about just being social. But also kind of my own personality is I like learning new things. It's just how I'm wired. So anytime, we get together, someone will have, and it might not even be MoGraph related stuff. It might be something about, like one of the guys in the group, Kyle, he is doing the van life thing, and he was building a Sprinter van. And so, we would get together and talk about that. And so regardless of what it is, like curiosity is the big component of the group. So, it's rare that you'll see us get together and not talk about, anything. It usually devolves into, sometimes it devolves into a bitch session about Adobe and what the hell is wrong with Adobe, and which is a favorite subject among artists all over the world. But most of the time, though, it kind of centers around what everybody's working on and where they're at in their career and their lives, and everybody's in very different places in the group, both in terms of skill level and also career and life. Like, I'm the oldest guy in the room, so I'm in a very different place than someone like Kyle, who just had their first kid, and he's he's a well-established artist, but he's in a very different life place. So the discussion, that was a long-winded way of saying the discussion really varies.
In your bio, you mentioned this, if I remember correctly from looking at your LinkedIn, lifelong learner, communicator, and educator, making all forms of visualization and tech easier to understand and junk. What is a lifelong learner? What does that mean to you?
It boils down really most importantly to curiosity. Lifelong learner is like this, they call it buzzword bingo sometimes, when you start throwing all that stuff in there, but it's a catchphrase kind of in the job world these days. For me, what it means is curiosity. I keep coming back to the fact that I love learning new stuff. And in my job at LinkedIn Learning, my role is, I cover a bunch of different content areas. I don't just cover video production and motion design anymore. In fact, I haven't covered that area in about 3 years now. I've been branching into other areas and in doing a whole range of things, from architecture and engineering and construction subjects to business franchising. I had an amazing call with a potential instructor about a franchising course, and it was fascinating learning about that process. It's something we all interact with franchises every day, and this dude is passionate about franchises. He loves them, and he just is. It was really infectious having him teach me about the subject as we were getting to know each other. And to me, that's what being a lifelong learner is about, is just having curiosity about the world and people and life and everything. Because, we're only here for a short time, but there's so much to do.
I remember the thing I always think about when you come across someone like that. I obviously haven't met this guy, but it reminds me of, so my wife played volleyball in college, and I've played basketball forever. But I remember pre Natalie, I had seen volleyball, but I thought it was like hot potato, just get the ball over the net. And I remember on one of our earlier dates, I was talking to her about how it's just, volleyball, yeah, it's a sport, but it's just a different sport because there's not plays and stuff, you're just trying to, and she was like, what are you talking about? There's not plays. And I was like, how can you run a play like that? You don't even know where the ball's going to go. So anyways, obviously I was educated, and you learn that from the outside, you look at something that doesn't make sense or that you're not familiar with, and it looks like just a boring, whatever. But then you get to talk to someone that understands it or is an expert in a space, and there's just this depth and I feel like it's beautiful, and this isn't talking about volleyball. And all of a sudden I was watching the game and watching what the players were doing differently, and I didn't even notice it. Yeah. And I would assume that's probably I don't know anything about franchises other than that's what McDonald's was, and then Ray Kroc made a bunch of money from it, and that's the extent of my knowledge on that.
It's crazy how much of our lives are impacted by franchises on a daily basis. And it was one of those things I know because I live in America, right? But you don't think about it. And then when you meet somebody whose life is vested in that world, it really gives you a new appreciation for what the subject is. And I think, coming back to the whole idea of lifelong learning it really is about being curious. One of the things I like about my gig now is that they could no matter what subject they gave me to go out and create content for, and recruit for, I know I could learn something interesting about it, and in their subjects, I always consider myself, I'm a creative guy, blah, and creative people don't think of themselves as business people. And they, in fact, some people, some artists recoil from business subjects because they're an artist, damn it. And, I don't want to talk about numbers, and, it's kind of silly because, if anybody who follows Chris Do would know, number one is money. You should know how much you're making. You should know how much you're worth. And it's something that we as artists are never really fully vested in. And yet I find myself talking to business people all day long and learning new things and becoming really fascinated with the ideas behind business and kind of getting a handle on that. So, the lifelong learning and curiosity is something that I hope I never lose, as long as I got the synapses are still firing.
And so I guess I'm curious more about the job that you have now. So you're as a I would say self-proclaimed lifelong learner. Anyone could proclaim that. Then there's the other side of doing it. I would in both courts, obviously, but your job is to facilitate. LinkedIn identifies we need courses on X, and then they say, Rob, go make the course. Essentially, you produce it. and then you have to
Yeah,
go
well,
find the experts and stuff to go teach it. Is that how that works?
yeah. My title is content manager, and really what a content manager does, I always like to say it's kind of like a department chair at a university and a sales and recruiting gig had a baby together, where I'm determining the curriculum and figuring out what it is, what kinds of courses we need in a given subject, and then going out and finding those people to teach and subject matter experts, and then managing the relationships. I have an existing body of instructors, and then I go out and find new instructors as needed. So both the personal interaction and the curiosity are really key components of the job, and being able to look at a subject and break it down into its important chunks.
And you probably have an advantage,
then,
or you almost want to have someone like yourself that's not an expert in whatever topic, because you're going to be approaching it theoretically in a similar way to the person that ultimately is the learner, right? So
yeah,
you get good at, like you said, get good at breaking it down to be digestible.
Yeah, and it's a really beautiful carryover from what I did in my teaching at Art Center, which I taught all beginner classes at Art Center, and I loved it because of the that breaking it down into its basic chunks component. That's just something I've always really enjoyed the process of, and the job that I have now is about that. I'm often the first learner. That's kind of how I try and position myself when I'm talking with an instructor. As I'm listening to them describe their idea for the course, I'm listening to it as that person who's going to sit down and watch it for the first time.
And so this is the other thing I've been really interested in, is learning as a topic, and trying to. You're on the level where you're trying to break it down into like how does one learn effectively? I assume that's like a strategy that you want to, that LinkedIn or any of these online, Udemy, these online academy type stuff. How, like, I guess I'll take it in this direction. I heard once that confusion always precedes learning. So like the way I take that is, when the light bulb goes on, like that moment that we like, that, there's a dopamine hit of like, yes, I understand. Right before that, you're confused. Do you agree with that? And is there anything that you could build on, or any other like key phases that you guys have identified when it comes to learning something new?
It's it's a really interesting idea, and I when full disclosure, Chris sent me the questions ahead of time, and I thought a lot about it. And one of the things the way I thought about it was, I went back and looked at how I learned all of the things that I've done throughout my career, whether it was learning how to become a graphic designer and learning Photoshop and Illustrator and Quark and then PageMaker, and then learning After Effects, and then learning 3D software, whether it was Strata Studio, and then Electric Image, and then Cinema 4D, and a little bit of Maya, and a little bit of 3D Studio Max, and like on and on and on. You start throwing all these things on top of there. There's always a wall that you run into, and one of two things happens: either you crash through the wall yourself, or someone helps you get through the wall. The real learning comes at that moment of transition through the wall. Like you're struggling. Like you said, there's that light bulb moment, and you hit that light bulb moment, and now suddenly you can actually do the thing that you were trying to do. One of the big problems with a lot of learning, people will often try to learn things out of context. I'm very much a contextual learner. I learn to do things having the conversation with the franchising guy. Like, I'm learning about franchising because I need to help him create a course table of contents in franchising. So I'm learning about it to reach a goal. When I was coming up as a production artist, I would learn new pieces of software because I needed to learn Illustrator because I needed to design logos. And so I would learn Illustrator specifically to design logos. And then we were doing layouts for magazines and trade ads and those kinds of things inside of Illustrator. And so I was doing it in that. And so every time I would need to do something, I would learn it to achieve some task. And A lot of times people will just say, I'm going to go out and learn blah, blah, blah. And they don't really have a reason for wanting to learn it. And to me, like, you won't, I don't think you'll get to that light bulb moment unless you have something specific that you're trying to do to learn it. And it's not to say that, going out and abstract learning isn't bad. It's just that, for me, the way my brain works is I need to have a goal in mind. Once I have a goal, then the learning the things to do to get to that goal become much, much easier. You still have to hit the wall and crash into it, but
I would say first of all, I would never have articulated it like that, but I'm thinking back on a couple different examples for myself. And I would say, building on that, the challenge is if you don't have a goal, even if it's a project, right? There has to be something where right. I have learned enough. Because if you don't have the end, then there's an infinite amount of knowledge that you could learn about anything. And then you are just like, I'm going to learn, Spanish. And then people that have spoken Spanish from the day they were born are still learning Spanish. So I need to learn Spanish so that I can communicate with the person at the restaurant or whatever, or I need to survive when I travel. I need to have a base level. Or for me, there's a couple times where I've picked up a strange amount of JavaScript coding, never taken a JavaScript class, but it was always, I learn in this much at a time. I need to do this thing with Google Scripts and send an email. And so then I Google, find out how to do it, and then I'm done and I go back to regular life. And then the next day, there's something else I want to add or tweak. But I think that's a great point of define what done looks like or what success is for your current stage of learning so that you don't end up in an infinite pool of knowledge. And then I feel like you probably just get burned out at some point you're just I guess I'm done and move on, but in a sad state as opposed to an accomplished state.
Yeah. When I'm kind of in that place right now. So for COVID, I started learning the bass guitar. I've been a drummer for most of my life, but I always wanted to learn a guitar, and I was like, damn it, I'm going to learn the bass guitar, damn it. And that was at the beginning of 2020. And so I started learning, and I play almost every day, but I don't really have a goal in mind. Sometimes I'll set out to learn bits and pieces of songs that I love, but it's not like I'm practicing for a gig. And so it's actually much harder to learn than it would be if I said, okay, I've got to play a casual gig at the end of the month and I need to learn 10 songs or I'm dead. That's a really different situation.
And then, so as far as deciding what to learn goes, I'm assuming that you would probably, I guess I'll just ask you, my assumption is that you kind of let life come at you, and then there's always multiple options on the table, and you choose which, next goal you're going to go after, and that dictates what you're going to learn. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, one of your questions was about active learning versus passive learning, I think. And that is, deciding what to learn. Most of the time it's situational. I need to learn, like you said, you talked about your JavaScript experience. I need to do this thing, and I'm going to learn how to do this thing. And then sometimes it's I just want to do this. It's something I've always wondered about, and I just love it, like bass guitar. And I've grown up with music, and I want to learn how to express myself on this instrument. But they're both valuable goals and emotions to have, but they're really difficult. Again, coming back to the way my brain works personally, I learn, if someone came to me and said, Rob, we're doing a gig at the end of the month, I need you to learn how to play these songs on the bass, that would have a very different motivation in my practice routines and everything. And so I'm not ready to play that gig yet, by the way.
Well, that's kind of I'm just thinking it's an analogy for so many other things in life too, that if you have an end and you define where you're going, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but if you had to learn how to play, what's a bass guitar, or what's a song that you could play on the bass, or that you want to learn how to play?
Man, there's so many. I actually have a giant playlist on Spotify that I made called Bass Shizzle. If anybody wants to look it up, I'll send you a link to it. They can look it up down there. But there's zillions of songs. But
I'm thinking of the only one, only for some reason, and I'm not a huge White Stripes fan, but I'm thinking of Seven Nation Army.
Yeah.
Which
is actually a great beginner song that wasn't played on bass; it was played on guitar.
Oh, interesting!
But everyone always plays it on bass. So, but yeah, it's a really fun. Like that was one of the things I learned early on because it's a great like dum 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 dum, and like you can get your head around it.
But so I'm thinking, if you defined the songs you needed, theoretically, you could go talk to the artist that made that, or it just like carves out your focus becomes so obvious that you need to do X, Y, and Z. Talk to the person that knows this. Your training is dictated. Everything is like all of a sudden clearer than if you just approach somebody that knows how to play guitar and you were like, teach me. That's harder for them to even help you as opposed to, can you teach me how to play this? And then they're also like, everything is more defined, I think, and helpful in that sense.
100%. That kind of contextual learning, and that's kind of, like one of your questions asked about family and learning. And I was thinking back to my son who just turned 20 this past week. And when he was growing up, he had the same problems in school that I did. Which was, I never understood why I was learning something. I need to have a why. Don't just tell me that math is important. Show me why it's important, and then I'll get there. Like geometry is a perfect example of that. I was terrible at geometry in high school, and yet I'm a really good 3D artist, which is all geometry. And had someone come to me when I was in high school and said, you can use this knowledge of geometry to do this amazing thing over here, I would have been much more motivated to learn geometry, but we don't teach subjects like that. And, it was trying to help my son see past that, some of the, when you're a kid, things seem, it's like, there's a futility to learning sometimes because you have no context for why it's important. And I think it's a big fault of our education system that we don't teach kids contextually. Make it
applicable.
Like that. Yeah. You need to learn math. Okay. Why? Math is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Give them real world problems. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, and it is, I feel like it's a similar analogy to me for when I'm reading a book. There's some books that I love, and then I go recommend it to somebody, and they're like, this is stupid. Like, it's nothing. And it's like, I forget the context of when I read this book and what I was going through in life and how it was like, take this knowledge, apply it right now. Like as soon as I put the book down, it's applicable. And I feel like it's the same thing, that there's this level of enjoyment and energy that you get, just intrinsic value and reward from having the context of your current situation in the learning. The same thing, like if you needed to learn franchising because you owned a business and like this is going to make or break your success in that business, you're going to love that and consume that in a far different way than someone that's like, it'd be pretty cool, like as a college student, to learn about franchising. It's just like tough.
Yeah.
Do you have any tactics or strategies? And you've listed a couple, but in like, if someone was like, I want to learn better, other than like context, like, okay, try and learn things that are contextually important to you. Is there any other tactics or strategies that you've come across?
Yeah. The most important one is tiny bites. I've taught so many people over the years, both, in my instruction at Art Center and, through the courses that I create on London.com and that sort of thing. And doing, weekend workshops and all those kinds of things. I can't tell you how many times I've met someone who wants to learn 3D animation and their first thing they want to do is make a feature animated film, a feature length film. And I'm like, that's not like, if you're going to be an architect, you don't set out to build the Empire State Building on your first project. Like it doesn't work like that. And you having a a realistic goal to start off with, and that might be a 5-second animation about a ball bouncing down the stairs, which is, one of the things I would do in my class was have people do a really simple animation of a ball bouncing down the stairs. And, it's one of those, wax on, wax off exercises that seems really silly, until you get into the details of it. And those little types of tiny bites will help you much better than some lofty, grandiose idea that isn't really achievable. Now, not to say that you can't get there, but it shouldn't be the place that you try and start from.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think you got to have early victories and the feel good energy from that.
Well, and also you just don't know enough. Like the process of making a 3D animated feature film, if you're at the Pixar level, there's literally hundreds, sometimes thousands of people that work on that film, and they're all doing combinations of different aspects of a massive production pipeline, and you can't hope to comprehend that that entire production process if you're still just learning the 3D software. Like it doesn't, like you can't, you need to, at some point you have to be able to, it's like, it would be like saying, I'm going to go to, coming back to Spanish, I'm going to go to Mexico without knowing a word of Spanish and sit down in a restaurant and order dinner. Like, you might luck out and meet a person who speaks English, but you're going to be like, I have no vocabulary for this experience. And I don't even know how to approach the pronunciation of words. But there's all these things that have to stack up before you can get to that. I would like to have some food, please. And you have to be able to build on that, like you said, the early wins to get to a point where you can finally order that meal. You notice that I didn't speak in Spanish, by the way, because I can't do it. I suck. Right,
exactly. Me too. I took that. Well, there's another example. I took, the required 2 years of Spanish in high school. I got the grade and never used it again. But yeah. So any other tactics or strategies? If not, we can jump to the next one.
I think that's really the most important one is bite things off small and set realistic goals for yourself for learning so that you're not trying to do that. Another anecdote coming back to the bass guitar, one of the songs I wanted to learn. So you asked me what song. There's a song by Larry Graham called Hair, Hair. You can look it up. It's one of the most, Larry Graham is the person that invented the technique of slap bass. And it really transformed music in the late 60s and 70s. And it is, that song in particular is one of the iconic licks. Like, all guitarists want to learn Stairway to Heaven, right? Like that's, if you go into Guitar Center and sit down with a guitar, there's at some point somebody's going to pick up a guitar off the wall and try and play Stairway to Heaven. Like that's one of the rules. And if you're a bass guitarist, like that's one of the songs that, if you're interested in that particular technique, that you're going to want to learn how to play just because it's such an important tune. And so, like, one of the things I said to a friend of mine who is a bass player, I was like, yeah, I'm going to learn how to play Larry Graham Hair. And he was like, hold up now, Rob. He's like, dude, he recognized in me the same thing that I was talking about. Like I was biting off. That was the equivalent of saying I want to make a feature film, was like, I'm going to learn how to play this song as my very first song when I haven't even learned how to go bump, bump, bump,
right,
bump, like consistently.
Right. That's interesting. That's a weird question, but what is the hardest thing that you've ever learned?
It's a really tough question because again, when I looked at the questions ahead of time, that was the one that I ran into a wall when I hit that question. I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to enjoy this conversation. And then I hit that question. I was like, the reason it's so tough is because, there's like learning everything is kind of hard. Like there's rarely you learn something effortlessly, right? There are people that are just gifted in something and they just go, it flows right into them. But when you're first starting, everything is hard. And to redirect the question a little bit is like, what would be the thing that gave you the most satisfaction, getting over that light bulb moment. And it would probably be 3D animation. So the very first project that I ever did for 3D was this DirecTV. It was part of a promo campaign for DirecTV. It was like 1996 or something like that. And I had to make this. The art director had sold this project to the client, but there weren't any 3D animators in the house. So I was like, I can learn how to do it, I think. And so it was one of those situations where I kind of painted myself into a corner, and I really needed to learn how to do this. Luckily, I had an amazing person who came in for a weekend. Like, we hired him to come in for a weekend and get me like started, and then I had to go and do the rest of it. And then he would come back at the very end, like 3 weeks later, and help me render the project. So Frank Cords is the guy's name. Awesome 3D artist back in the day, and he came in at the start and kind of showed me the ropes. It was a brand new piece of software, Electric Image, that I'd never used before, and so he got me going, and then I would just crash and burn every night. And then about 3 weeks later, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to hit the render button. And Frank came back in and looked at my project files and kind of, adjusted some things for me. And then together we like went click and hit the render button and came out the other end, and it mostly didn't suck. And the client was really happy. And we did all the usual changes and revisions and all that crap. But like, that was a really amazing moment where I went from literally zero to having something that ended up winning an award from, I think it was either Promax or Telly award for that animation. And it was, but again, it was a really difficult process, and I just had no clue. I had clues about what I was doing, and I had a clearly defined goal. We had done, extensive storyboarding and style frames of the project, so I knew what I needed to do, but I didn't have any of the vocabulary. I knew what I wanted to order at the restaurant, but I had none of the vocabulary. So I had a guy come and sit with me and point at things on the menu and show me the words for them. And that's, from a metaphor standpoint, that's kind of how it went. And then I got to the point where I could, make that order. And
but you went from like no motion graphics work or previous work. And
no,
then
no 3D work.
Oh, 3D work. Okay, so you'd done motion
I'd already done a few projects in. Yeah, so I'd already done a few projects in. It wasn't After Effects yet; it was called Cosa Effects because Adobe hadn't bought it. I'd already done some little small 2D projects in that, little logo animations and lower thirds and things like that. But that was my first like 3D project, and it was, again, you asked what the hardest thing was. That like say, everything's hard to learn. Like, there aren't any easy things to learn, but there's things that are more satisfying than others.
Yeah.
When you get to that.
I feel like that I would, another like analogy or way of laying it out that I've heard is when, like you're saying, break it up into chunks. That idea of, and I can't remember, I tried to find this. It was like a TED Talk or something talking about that confusion and then the clarity and then confusion and clarity of like when you're learning.
Yeah.
And the role of the teacher is to make sure that the periods of confusion are not too long, because that's when you give up. So it's like you have to have enough confusion, like to be most efficient in learning is the optimal amount of confusion before the breakthrough. And then you just repeat it, but the breakthrough is what gives you the energy to go to the next thing. And that's exactly I would articulate that the hardest thing is one where you are stretching yourself on that confusion period, maybe to the point where, like, if it had been, 2% harder or whatever, 20% harder, you'd have been like, okay, screw this. I can't do this. This is way like I give up. But it was right there where you were like hanging on and got it,
Yeah. And that's, you can't, from a teaching standpoint, your students have to hit that point and break through it themselves. Like, you can't show them, I can show you how to make a cube, but you have to, at some point you have to make the cube for yourself, and you have to sit down by yourself and remember where that icon was and what the icon meant and what the different parameters of the cube mean. Whether it's the size of each side of the cube or the roundness of the corners, the chamfer and fillets. Like, there's all these things that go along with making that cube. Like, at some point you have to go and sit down and do it yourself without me there, and that's the point. Like, I can show you where all those buttons are, and I can tell you why cubes are important, but then at some point you have to sit down and do the cube yourself.
Gotcha. So this is like an abstract question, so I'm going to throw that out there up front, but this is a very specific example that I have thought about for myself. So I work for Webfoot Painting, and we're adapting this new business intelligence software called Domo. And one of the key things that is beneficial in implementing this is being able to code in SQL or SQL. And so
okay.
we're planning on outsourcing this work to somebody else, an actual developer. But I was just going through the mental exercise of, let's say that I had to learn SQL. Never done it. I've done, again, I have base level of JavaScript. So you can use an analogy from something in your world. But I would say if you were giving me advice of, okay, I need to learn this thing that I have never done before, how would you go about suggesting that I learn that topic? Assuming, and again, in my situation, I don't actually have to because we're outsourcing it. But there's that part of me that's like, I feel like I could do it. I just need, I need guidance on where to go. Granted, this is not an expertise of yours either.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so I have just a tiny bit of just understanding of that style of coding. A good friend of mine at work is an absolute super nerd about that. He actually left our team to go to a different team because he was so good at writing SQL queries against our existing database. So step one would be, asking the question, why do I need to learn this? And that's step one. Why am I trying to learn this? I'm trying to learn SQL because I need to write queries against an existing database and generate a result on screen locally. Like, there's a sentence that you could do with SQL. And so step one is, how do I connect to the database? Like that would be like step one. Like, I need to establish a connection between your query software and the database you're querying the information from. So you got to just get a simple query going. Can I call up this one line of information? Yes or no? And then when you get that one line of information locally, okay, that's kind of your aha moment. I can actually produce. That's like the equivalent of like writing hello on the computer screen, right? You've got that one moment, and now you have to ask yourself, okay, what's the next level up in complexity that I need to do? Like, maybe you have to perform some transforms on that data, before it gets displayed. Like, whether it's collating it differently, arranging it from a horizontal format to a vertical format, so that it aligns with some other customer
set.
Data. Yeah, exactly. So then the next step in that process would be, okay, I want to call that line. I'm going to call 2 lines of data this time, and I'm going to take those 2 lines of data. I'm going to get them locally, and then I'm going to recollate them vertically. Like, there's another one. Like, so that gives you, now I've got 2 repeatable things I can do. And without belaboring the point, like, build on your small successes one layer at a time by asking, starting with why, and then working up to that, figuring out what are all the things that need to happen to get to that why, and then taking those little things like one layer at a time.
And again, it just goes back to like your analogy of I want to make a feature length animation. It's like,
yes,
that's great, good.
Yeah.
Just make the ball bounce down the stairs, and then we'll talk about the next step after that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm going to jump back to your. This is on your LinkedIn. You have this in your bio. You say "and junk," and then you also junk. From my perception of looking at the articles and stuff that you've written, there's like a Rob Garrett definition of "and junk." What is and junk or junk to you?
I actually would prefer to say and shit, but I'm trying to be all career sensitive, so I say and junk on LinkedIn. But really, what it's about is informality. I'm a super casual guy. I hate corporate speak, and I hate honorifics, and having to call someone doctor so and so. Yes, I understand you went to school for a long ass time and you know a lot about medical history, but you're still just a dude or a woman. And I really, like, for me, the and junk is a way of me holding on to a little bit of my informal, casual nature in a world that wants desperately for me to fit into a very specific corporate box and to use lots of jargon and acronyms and buzzword bingo, as the phrase goes. And the newsletter itself that I write is something I do. I had this grandiose goal of having it be like every 2 weeks I'm going to have this thing, and it's kind of devolved into about every 3 weeks or so. I'm a few days late from my 2-week mark this week, and so it's probably not going to get out until Tuesday. The goal of it, the newsletter itself, which is the awesome power of junk and stuff, is really more of a mental health exercise. I look at, typically when I write articles, it's about something that's, exasperating me at the time. And I have a little database in my task manager where I store ideas. And anytime something is pissing me off, and I'm like, oh, that'd probably make a good article idea, I throw it into the database with a couple of notes. And then I have now, I've got like 50 or 60 article ideas in there in that database, and I can just scroll through and find something that resonates and then go back and start that article idea. And the language that I use in the article is super uncorporate, and with much of the chagrin of probably my boss. And the titles that I pick are super uncorporate, and that's all really on purpose. And again, it's me trying to maintain a little bit of my own personal identity in that way. We're in this really weird place with the what's called the creator economy, which you're creating a podcast right now. That's part of that same ideology, which so much of the business world up to this point in history has been about subsuming yourself to some larger goal, and that's really all of corporate America has been about marching along to the beat with all your compatriots to get to this grandiose organizational goal. And it's important. The goal is important, but you really can't lose yourself in that process. And I'm just not that dude to go around using a lot of that kind of corporate speak and stuff. And so that's the articles and my title line on my LinkedIn profile is, again, a way for me to kind of maintain that little bit of myself. Anytime I'm feeling like I have to say something in corporate speak, I can look at that and go, wait, you don't have to do that.
Right. And then you, with the newsletter, because I feel like it maybe is similar as this podcast is for me, but that's just if I were to phrase it another way, you mentioned like a mental health exercise, a creative outlet to just kind of take a moment to, I don't know, think about something, articulate it, and then put a bow on it and ship it and say, there's my thought on that. And I move on to the next thing.
That's exactly it. And you're not, like, so much of what we do at work is not our own. Like, we don't get to actually own it. And this is something I'm not beholden to anybody when I write that article. I'm writing it strictly in my own words for myself. Well, it's not all my own words, because I would have a lot more obscenities in it if I was writing my own words. But it's something that I can own at the end. I don't have to get sign off from anyone when I hit the publish button.
Right. That's awesome. Okay, so I've got some wrap up questions here. Book recommendations. And I always like to phrase it as it could be your favorite book, maybe a book that you've recommended to others more than any other book. You could give me top 3 or whatever. But what are some book recommendations or a recommendation?
I have what I would call my desert island books. I read a lot of science fiction, and my friend Russ Davis actually introduced me to sci-fi. It's funny. I was 11 years old in 1977. So when I went to see Star Wars for the first time, and I've loved science fiction all my whole life, but I never really read it until I was in my 20s. And a good friend at a ad agency I was working at was like, "Hey Rob, you should really read this book." It was a book by David Brin, Uplift War. Was that first book, and that kind of, I was like 26 or so at the time, and it just like re-sparked, like I'd never enjoyed reading until that moment, and then I would just start devouring books, and so now I have these desert island books that are my favorite ones. So that was a really long-winded one. Let me get the books. I keep them on a shelf. That's where that's how important they are. So the first one is Neil Stephenson, The Diamond Age. And it's a story about a young girl who comes into possession of a very special interactive book, and it changes her life and the life of the dude who created the book. And it's an absolutely amazing near future romp through a very plausible corporate and technological landscape. And the human characteristics of it are absolutely amazing. All my favorite books are really there's people at the core of them. They're amazing technology and ideas, but the people in them, the characters, are absolutely amazing. So that's Neil Stephenson, The Diamond Age. Larry Niven, Protector. So Larry Niven is the guy who wrote Ringworld. This is set in that same universe, and it's a story about a alien who comes into our system, and wackiness ensues, I guess, basically, for lack of a better term. And the thing I love about it, again, is the main character and the sense of time in this. The main character, who starts it all off, has traveled for thousands of years in a spaceship by himself and comes to our system, and then passes on his information to a human who shouldn't be able to receive that information, but it turns out we're actually related to this creature from the distant past. And so, again, wackiness ensues. But it's the ideas inside of it, the technology. It's hard sci-fi, so there's no anti-gravity or anything like that. And so it's fantastic. And then, last but not least, is the Golden Age Trilogy, which is a story by John Wright, which is set thousands of years in the future. And it is a story about how society could be transformed by the ideas that are present in virtual reality and alternate universes and that sort of thing. And so virtual universes, sorry, not alternate universes. And it's 3 books long. It's a trilogy, and they're very hefty books with crap loads of gigantic words and very grandiose language. But the ideas about how society could change are really, I think, fascinating and relevant to where we are in our technological growth right now. And
segueing that into favorite movie, I'm wondering if you are a sci-fi movie person also, or you have a different favorite movie.
Sci-fi movies are difficult for me because books are so good at communicating technology. Like, take The Expanse, for example, which I read all of those books. And when I went to watch the show, I just couldn't get into it because one of the things I loved about the Expanse books, the books that the Expanse is based on, is that they're hard sci-fi, which means that there's no anti-gravity. The only up is the direction of thrust. Like, that's one of the main tenets. If you think about the ship in the Rocinante, which is the main ship in that, part of the characteristic of that ship is it's a giant section of girders, and the floor is wherever the opposite of wherever the engines are pointing. So there's always a point in whatever dogfight they're in where the ship has to change direction, and suddenly everybody's weightless, and then the thrust comes back, and then they're going a different direction suddenly. And there's all of these really cool constraints that physics puts on us that are really hard to do in filmmaking. And so it's really frustrating to read an amazing book like that and then to go and watch the adaptation of it. So I don't know. So coming back to movies, though, my favorite movie is probably, well, right now anyway, I could watch Trolls over and over again. It's just a big glittery magic hug.
Yeah. I have seen that movie more times than I can count because I have a 4-year-old daughter, and she requests it's like in the car, the soundtrack that she wants to listen to is Trolls, which is actually not a bad soundtrack. I don't mind it.
No, not.
Or Frozen on repeat.
Yeah, no, I could do without Frozen, but Trolls is absolutely, when that movie came out, I saw it on Election Day 2016, and it was a very challenging day emotionally, and I was down in Southern California visiting my family down there, and I was like, I would take my niece to the movies, and I said, what do you want to see, Janine? And she's like, I want to see Trolls, and I was like, okay, damn it, we're going to go see Trolls, and we went into the movie theater, and I was just in a foul, just awful, dark place, and suddenly when I came out of the movie theater, the world was better. Like, it was such an amazing thing. Like, and it's such the thing I love about the movie is that it doesn't take itself seriously at all. Like, it's just right when you think they're in a serious moment, something stupid will happen and break the spell. And I just love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, if someone wants to connect with you, what's your preferred method of contact? How would you like them to reach out?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. Full disclosure, I work there. But it's also probably the place I'm most active from a social media standpoint. I still have my Instagram account at Bending Pixels, BENDINGPIXELS, Bending Pixels. And then I'm on Facebook as well, but I don't go there much anymore. I'll post announcements when I write an article. But the easiest place to reach me is probably on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. Well, for everyone else watching this or listening to it, I don't know, I might actually post this on YouTube because the quality is going to be better. But Rob mentioned this new software, Riverside, so we'll see if it works out. And we have a 1-hour time cap, so we're coming up on that. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat about learning, Rob. I think this was a fun conversation for me.
I'm really glad you reached out. It was amazing to meet you those years ago at the whiskey bar, and it's fantastic to talk to you today. I'm grateful for the time. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're at 57 minutes and 30 seconds. So I'll